The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trading post as Samuel Crawford wiped the sweat from his weathered brow. He had been a rancher for nearly 15 years, building his cattle empire from nothing but determination and hard work. Today, however, he found himself in an unusual situation that would change his life forever. The Apache raid on the neighboring settlement had left many captives in the hands of traders who frequented these remote outposts. Samuel had come here seeking to purchase cattle, but his attention was immediately drawn to a young Apache woman sitting quietly in the shade of a wooden wagon. Her dark eyes held a depth of intelligence and strength that seemed untouched by her circumstances. The trader, a gruff man named Peterson, noticed Samuel's interest immediately. Business was business, after all, and Peterson had developed a keen eye for potential customers over his many years in this harsh frontier trade. "She's quite something, isn't she?" Peterson remarked, approaching Samuel with the confident stride of a man accustomed to making deals. Captured just last week during a skirmish near the Gila River. The Apache called her Ayana, which means eternal blossom in their tongue. She's young, strong, and from what I can tell, she understands English well enough. Samuel found himself studying the woman more intently. There was something about her bearing that suggested nobility, as if she came from an important family within her tribe. Her traditional dress, though worn from travel, showed intricate beadwork that spoke of skilled craftsmanship and high status among her people. "What are you asking for her?" Samuel inquired, though he immediately questioned his own motives for even considering such a purchase. He had never owned another human being, and the very idea troubled his conscience. Yet something about this particular situation felt different, though he couldn't quite articulate why. Peterson's eyes lit up with the familiar gleam of a man sensing a profitable transaction. "For you, Crawford, seeing as how you've been good for business over the years, I'd let her go for $200. That's less than I paid for her, mind you, but I need to move my inventory quickly." $200 was a substantial sum, equivalent to what Samuel might spend on several head of prime cattle. He found himself torn between practical financial considerations and an inexplicable urge to remove this woman from her current predicament. The way she sat with quiet dignity, despite her circumstances, reminded him of his own late mother, who had possessed that same inner strength during the difficult early years of frontier life. "Has she been mistreated?" Samuel asked, his voice carrying a tone that suggested this information would significantly influence his decision. "Not by me," Peterson replied quickly, raising his hands in a defensive gesture. "I run a respectable operation here. She's been fed regularly, given proper shelter, and treated with the basic decency any person deserves, but I can't speak for what might happen if she ends up with some of the other buyers who frequent this area." Samuel glanced around the trading post and noticed several rough-looking men examining various captives with expressions that made his stomach turn. The frontier attracted all types of people, and not all of them possessed even basic human compassion. The thought of Ayana falling into truly cruel hands made his decision for him. "I'll take her," Samuel announced, reaching into his coat pocket for his leather money pouch. $200, and I want her personal belongings if any remain." Peterson's face broke into a satisfied grin as he extended his hand to finalize the agreement. "Smart choice, Crawford. You won't regret this investment. She'll work harder than any 3 ranch hands you could hire." As Samuel counted out the money, he caught Ayana watching the transaction with careful attention. Her expression revealed neither hope nor despair, but rather a kind of resigned awareness of her changing circumstances. When their eyes met briefly, he saw no hatred there, which surprised him given everything she had endured. The paperwork, such as it was in this remote location, consisted mainly of a crude bill of sale that Peterson scrawled on a piece of brown paper. Samuel folded the document and placed it in his coat pocket, already feeling the weight of responsibility that came with his decision. "She has a small bundle of personal items," Peterson mentioned, gesturing toward the wagon. "Traditional medicines, some jewelry, things like that. Part of the purchase price." Samuel nodded and approached Ayana slowly, not wanting to frighten her. When he reached her location, he knelt down to bring himself closer to her eye level, a gesture of respect that clearly surprised her. "My name is Samuel Crawford," he said quietly, speaking directly to her rather than about her. "I own a cattle ranch about a day's ride from here. I want you to know that you will be treated fairly and with respect at my home." Ayana regarded him steadily for a long moment before responding in accented but clear English. You speak as if I have choices in this matter. Her directness caught him off guard, but Samuel appreciated her honesty. You're right. The circumstances aren't of your choosing, and I won't pretend otherwise. But I can promise you that your situation will be better with me than it might be elsewhere. She gathered her small bundle of possessions and stood with fluid grace, demonstrating the natural poise that had first caught his attention. Then let us proceed to this ranch of yours. Samuel Crawford. The journey to his property would take them through rugged terrain that required careful navigation, especially with the added responsibility of ensuring Ayana's safety and comfort. Samuel had prepared his wagon with extra supplies, anticipating that the return trip might present unexpected challenges. As they traveled away from the trading post, Samuel found himself wondering about the wisdom of his impulsive decision. He had acted on instinct rather than careful planning, something that was quite unlike his usual methodical approach to life decisions. Yet every time he glanced back at Ayana sitting quietly in the wagon bed, he felt a strange sense of rightness about the choice he had made. The landscape they traversed was both beautiful and dangerous, with rocky outcroppings providing shelter for wild animals and potential human threats. Samuel kept his rifle within easy reach, while maintaining a steady pace that would get them home before nightfall. During a brief rest stop to water the horses, Ayana spoke again. Why did you purchase me? You do not seem like the other men at that place. Samuel considered her question carefully before answering. I'm not entirely sure myself. Something about your situation troubled me, and I felt compelled to act. I suppose I hoped to offer you a chance at a better life, though I realize that may sound presumptuous given the circumstances. It does sound presumptuous, she agreed, but her tone held no malice. Yet your manner suggests sincerity. Time will reveal your true intentions. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Samuel's ranch came into view. The sight of his modest but well-maintained buildings filled him with the pride of ownership, but also with sudden anxiety about how this dramatic change would affect his carefully ordered life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities he had never anticipated when he woke up this morning. Dawn broke over the Crawford ranch, with an unusual sense of anticipation in the air. Samuel had spent a restless night in his own bed while Ayana occupied the small guest room he had hastily prepared for her arrival. The previous evening had been awkward but civil, with minimal conversation during their simple supper of beans and cornbread. Samuel rose earlier than usual, driven by a mixture of nervous energy and genuine concern for his unexpected houseguest's comfort. He had never shared his living space with anyone since his mother's death 5 years earlier, and the presence of another person in his home felt both foreign and somehow natural at the same time. When he emerged from his bedroom, he discovered that Ayana was already awake and had somehow managed to prepare coffee, using his unfamiliar kitchen equipment. The rich aroma filled the small house, creating an atmosphere of domestic warmth that had been absent for far too long. Good morning, Samuel offered tentatively, uncertain about the appropriate protocol for their unusual situation. I hope you slept well enough. Ayana nodded politely while pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. Your bed was comfortable. I have not slept on such soft materials in many weeks. She handed him one of the cups, their fingers brushing briefly during the exchange. I've been thinking about our arrangement, Samuel continued, accepting the coffee gratefully. I don't want you to feel like a prisoner here. You're free to move about the property, help with tasks if you choose, or simply rest and recover from your recent ordeals. Freedom is a relative concept in my current situation, Ayana replied with characteristic directness. But I appreciate your consideration. I am accustomed to useful work and would prefer to contribute rather than remain idle. Samuel found her practical attitude refreshing, though he remained sensitive to the complex dynamics of their relationship. The ranch requires constant attention. There's always cooking, cleaning, tending animals, maintaining equipment. If any of those tasks interest you, I'd welcome your help. I am skilled in all such matters, she confirmed. Among my people, women manage household responsibilities along with many other duties. I can cook foods that will be new to your palate. If you trust my knowledge, I'd be honored to try Apache cuisine, Samuel responded, genuinely curious about her cultural traditions. I have to admit, my own cooking skills are rather limited. You'd probably be doing both of us a favor. A hint of something that might have been amusement flickered across Ayana's features. Very well. I will prepare our meals and maintain your household. In return, You will treat me with the respect you promised yesterday. Absolutely, Samuel agreed firmly. That's not negotiable. Their first full day together established a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Ayanna demonstrated remarkable competence in managing domestic tasks while Samuel attended to the outdoor work that ranching demanded. She prepared lunch using ingredients from his limited pantry but applied traditional Apache cooking methods that transformed simple supplies into flavorful, nourishing food. During their midday meal, Samuel learned more about her background. Ayanna had been the daughter of a respected Apache leader. Educated in both traditional tribal ways and some European customs through contact with missionaries. Her intelligence and education explained her excellent English and her dignified bearing even in difficult circumstances. My father believed that understanding different cultures would help our people navigate the changing world, she explained. He insisted that I learn multiple languages and customs, though he never imagined I would need such knowledge under these circumstances. Your father sounds like a wise man, Samuel observed. These are complicated times for everyone trying to build a life in this territory. Wise, yes, but wisdom could not protect him from the soldiers who attacked our village, Ayanna said quietly. Nor could it prevent my capture during the chaos that followed. Samuel felt a pang of sympathy for her losses, but he also sensed that she did not want pity. Instead, he focused on practical matters. I hope you'll feel comfortable here while you decide what you'd like to do with your future. I won't keep you here against your will indefinitely. Where would I go? She asked with stark realism. My people are scattered, my family is gone, and I have no resources with which to build an independent life. For now, this arrangement serves both our needs. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors when Samuel's nearest neighbors, the Morrison family, arrived for what seemed to be a social call but was clearly motivated by curiosity about his new houseguest. James Morrison and his wife Elizabeth had been friendly acquaintances for several years, but their sudden appearance suggested that news of Samuel's unusual purchase had already begun circulating through the scattered ranch community. Samuel, James called out heartily as he climbed down from his wagon. We were passing through the area and thought we'd stop by to see how you're faring. Samuel emerged from the barn where he had been repairing harness leather, wiping his hands on a rag. Good to see you both. What brings you out this direction? Elizabeth Morrison's eyes were already scanning the property for signs of the Apache woman whose acquisition had apparently become local gossip. Oh, we were just checking on our neighbors. These are uncertain times, and we like to make sure everyone is safe and well. Before Samuel could respond, Ayanna appeared in the doorway of the house, carrying a basin of wash water. Her presence immediately drew the Morrisons' attention, and Samuel could feel the tension in the air shift noticeably. James, Elizabeth, I'd like you to meet Ayanna, Samuel said, deciding that straightforward introduction was better than awkward avoidance. She's been helping me manage the household tasks. I see, Elizabeth replied, her tone carefully neutral but her expression revealing obvious disapproval. How? Interesting. James Morrison stepped forward with the bluff friendliness that characterized many frontier men, though his eyes remained calculating. Pleasure to meet you, miss. I hope you're finding the work here satisfactory. It is adequate, Ayanna responded simply, demonstrating the same dignified reserve she had shown since Samuel first encountered her. Well, Elizabeth said with forced brightness, I do hope you're being careful, Samuel. These are dangerous times and you never know about trusting people from certain backgrounds. Samuel felt his jaw tighten at the implied insult. Ayanna has been nothing but helpful and honest since she arrived. I consider myself fortunate to have her assistance. The conversation continued for another uncomfortable few minutes before the Morrisons made their excuses and departed. Samuel watched their wagon disappear down the dusty track leading away from his property, knowing that this visit represented only the beginning of community scrutiny regarding his unconventional household arrangement. Your neighbors do not approve of my presence here, Ayanna observed once the visitors were gone. Their approval isn't something I require for decisions about my own property, Samuel replied firmly. Though I suspect we'll be dealing with more of their opinions in the future. You will face criticism for showing kindness to an Apache woman, she warned. Some people will question your judgment and your motives. Let them question, Samuel said with more confidence than he felt. I know why I made the decision I did, and I'm prepared to stand by it. As the sun set on their first full day together, Samuel realized that his life had already changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. The simple presence of another person in his home had altered the entire atmosphere of his daily routine. More importantly, his growing respect for Ayana's intelligence, strength, and dignity was beginning to complicate his original intentions in ways he was only beginning to understand. 3 weeks had passed since Ayana's arrival at the Crawford Ranch, and the rhythm of their shared daily life had evolved into something neither of them had expected. What began as a practical arrangement born of unusual circumstances had gradually transformed into a partnership that challenged both of their preconceptions about their respective cultures and personal capabilities. Samuel found himself looking forward to their evening conversations, which had become a cherished part of his routine. After the day's work was complete, they would sit on the front porch watching the spectacular Arizona sunsets while discussing everything from practical ranch management to philosophical questions about justice, survival, and the rapidly changing nature of frontier life. "You mentioned that your father was a leader among your people," Samuel said one evening as they shared coffee and the sweet cornbread that had become Ayana's specialty. "What kind of leader was he?" Ayana gazed thoughtfully at the purple and orange sky before answering. "He was what you might call a peace chief. His role was to guide our band through diplomacy rather than warfare, though he was certainly capable of fighting when necessary. He believed that wisdom and patience were more powerful than anger and violence." "That sounds like a difficult position to maintain in these times," Samuel observed, thinking of the many stories he had heard about conflicts between settlers and various Apache bands. "It became increasingly difficult." "Yes," she agreed. Many of the younger warriors grew frustrated with his peaceful approach, especially as more settlers arrived and the soldiers became more aggressive. They wanted immediate action rather than careful negotiation. Samuel nodded, understanding the complexity of her father's situation. "Leadership often requires making unpopular decisions for the greater good. My father used to say that a true leader must think 7 generations into the future," Ayana continued. "He was trying to find a way for our people to survive and adapt without losing everything that made us who we are." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses, unusual at this late hour. Samuel rose quickly, his hand instinctively moving toward the rifle that always rested within reach. As the riders came into view, he recognized the distinctive silhouette of Sheriff Morrison, James Morrison's brother, accompanied by 2 other men Samuel didn't immediately recognize. "Good evening, Crawford," Sheriff Morrison called out as he dismounted. "Sorry to bother you so late, but we've had some reports that needed investigating." "What kind of reports?" Samuel asked, though he had a sinking feeling that he already knew the general nature of the complaints. "Concerns about your living arrangements here," the sheriff replied, his eyes finding Ayana where she stood quietly beside the door. "Some folks in town are worried about having an Apache woman living freely on a ranch so close to settled areas." Samuel felt his temper beginning to rise. "Ayana hasn't caused any problems for anyone. She's been helping me manage the ranch, nothing more." "I'm sure that's true," Sheriff Morrison said in the diplomatically neutral tone that lawmen often adopted when dealing with potentially volatile situations. "But you have to understand the concerns people have, especially given some of the recent troubles with Apache raids in other parts of the territory." "She had nothing to do with any raids," Samuel protested firmly. "She was a victim of circumstances, not a perpetrator of violence." "That may be so, but perception matters in situations like this," the sheriff continued. "I've got pressure from town council members and prominent citizens to ensure that all Apache individuals in the area are properly accounted for and supervised." Ayana stepped forward with calm dignity. "What exactly are you proposing, Sheriff?" "Well, miss, there's been talk about establishing a more formal arrangement, some kind of written agreement that makes your status here clear and provides assurance to the community that appropriate precautions are being taken." Samuel bristled at the implication. "What kind of precautions? She's a person, not a dangerous animal that needs to be contained." "Now, Crawford, no need to get defensive," one of the other men interjected. "We're just trying to find a solution that works for everyone involved." "And what solution might that be?" Samuel demanded. Sheriff Morrison cleared his throat uncomfortably. "There's been some discussion about the possibility of marriage. A legal marriage would clarify the woman's status and provide the kind of social structure that people find acceptable." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke from a wildfire, unexpected and potentially transformative. Samuel felt his heart begin racing as he realized the implications of what the sheriff was proposing. Marriage had not been part of his original intentions when he purchased Ayana from the trader, but the idea was not entirely unwelcome. Marriage, Ayana repeated quietly, her voice betraying no emotion. You are suggesting that marriage would solve your community's concerns about my presence here. It would legitimize the arrangement, Sheriff Morrison confirmed. Married couples are understood and accepted, even when they come from different backgrounds. Samuel looked at Ayana, trying to read her reaction to this unexpected development. Her expression remained carefully neutral, but he thought he detected a slight tension in her posture that suggested she was not entirely opposed to the idea. This is a rather significant decision to make under pressure from community concerns, Samuel said carefully. It deserves proper consideration. Of course, the sheriff agreed, but I should mention that if some alternative arrangement isn't established soon, there may be official pressure to relocate Miss Ayana to one of the designated areas where Apache individuals are being consolidated for administrative purposes. The threat was clear, though diplomatically delivered. Samuel realized that they were being presented with a choice between marriage and separation, with no guarantee that the designated areas the sheriff mentioned would provide Ayana with safety or decent treatment. How much time do we have to make this decision? Samuel asked. I'd say you have until the end of next week, Sheriff Morrison replied. That should give you both sufficient time to consider your options and decide how you'd like to proceed. After the sheriff and his companions departed, Samuel and Ayana sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the unexpected ultimatum they had received. The comfortable evening routine they had established suddenly felt fragile and temporary. I want you to know, Samuel finally said, that I would never pressure you into marriage simply to solve a political problem. If you prefer to leave here rather than enter into such an arrangement, I'll help you find safe passage to wherever you want to go. Ayana studied his face carefully in the dim light of the porch lantern. And where would I go, Samuel? You know as well as I do that a lone Apache woman has few safe options in this territory. There might be ways to reach family members or friendly tribes, Samuel suggested, though he knew the likelihood of such connections was minimal. My immediate family is dead, she stated matter-of-factly. The band I grew up with is scattered. The designated areas the sheriff mentioned are little better than prisons where people are left to survive on inadequate government rations. Samuel felt the weight of her limited choices pressing down on both of them. So what do you think about the marriage option? I think, Ayana said slowly, that marriage to you would be preferable to the available alternatives. But I also think that such a decision should be based on more than just avoiding worse circumstances. What do you mean? I mean that if we are to marry, it should be because we believe we can build a genuine life together, not simply because external forces are pushing us toward that choice. Samuel considered her words carefully. Over the past 3 weeks, he had come to genuinely admire and respect Ayana's intelligence, strength, and character. The prospect of marriage to her was appealing for reasons that had nothing to do with community pressure or legal technicalities. I think we could build a good life together, he said honestly. These past weeks have shown me that we work well as partners, and I've come to care about your well-being in ways that go beyond simple hospitality. And I have come to respect your kindness and integrity, Ayana replied. You have treated me with more consideration than I had any right to expect given the circumstances of our meeting. They talked late into the night, discussing the practical and emotional aspects of marriage, their hopes for the future, and their mutual commitment to making such a union work if they chose to proceed. By the time they finally retired to their respective rooms, both had reached the same conclusion. The next morning, Samuel rode into town to speak with the preacher about arranging a wedding ceremony. Within a week, Ayana became Mrs. Samuel Crawford in a simple ceremony attended by a few necessary witnesses and marked by genuine affection and mutual respect rather than passionate romance. Their marriage proved successful beyond either of their initial expectations. Ayana's intelligence and practical skills complemented Samuel's ranching expertise perfectly, and their partnership transformed his modest operation into one of the most prosperous spreads in the area. More importantly, their relationship evolved from practical cooperation into deep affection and eventual love. The community criticism that had initially prompted their marriage gradually subsided as people observed the obvious success of their partnership. Samuel and Ayana Crawford became respected members of their community, known for their fair dealing, hard work, and the gracious hospitality they offered to travelers passing through their area. Years later, when telling their story to their children, they would both agree that what began as an impulsive act of compassion had become the foundation for the happiest and most fulfilling period of both their lives. Sometimes the most important decisions are made not through careful planning, but through simple human decency and the willingness to see beyond surface differences to the character beneath.